So ladies, gentlemen, fellow Kryptonians out there, here we are post CinemaCon, and we have quite a lot to discuss coming out of what we have learned about Superman. So as a result, be prepared for, well, as usual, a very long video on the channel, and just know that we are going to get into all of the new quotes which give us all the new descriptions of the movie, the plot teasers, where Superman is at in his career, his relationship with Lois Lane, Lex Luthor, the conflict of the movie, footage descriptions of what was shown at CinemaCon, all kinds of brand new details like that. It's going to be a long one. You guys know how I do here on the channel. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about the overall CinemaCon presentation itself. So, as you already know, no trailer. And you might be like, wait, but no trailer at all? Like, what happened there? Now, believe it or not, guys, despite me, like many of you, thinking that there could have been a trailer, the official trailer for Superman at CinemaCon, and how it turns out that there wasn't, that actually wasn't the most shocking revelation for me. Like, that may sound like Coke being like, oh, I thought there would be a trailer or something. No, honestly. Not that I knew there wasn't going to be one. Like, not at all. It's just that as there wasn't one, it wasn't the most surprising thing in the world if you've been watching my previous videos. So, for those of you who don't know, it's like, why? Well, you may have heard me say in multiple videos before that if we did get a trailer, there was still a big question of if we'd see it released publicly or not, and that perhaps, maybe, they'd save it for Superman Day on April 18th. So it turns out that perhaps our apprehensions of the April 18th release of something were kind of half right in how, well, it turns out that Superman Day will now most likely be the day we'll see something released to us in the public in the form of an official trailer. But as for what was shown, and this is the thing, they didn't come empty-handed, as they did reveal a behind-the-scenes sizzle reel of the movie, even an extended look of the scene where Krypto saves and drags Superman to the Fortress of Solitude to be healed by his Fortress robots. And of course, we're going to go over those descriptions of that in this video. Another good point I felt that was made by Rebel of Reality over on Twitter, shout out to him, is that when you kind of look at this in retrospect, this does start to make a bit more sense, and I'm going to ask you to try and be as level-headed as you can, because I know a lot of you are frustrated about, or like underwhelmed at, what we did get out of CinemaCon. So number one, it's that, well, believe it or not, and you can call this code, but seriously, we were never actually told we were going to get a trailer at CinemaCon. It was just a lot of us assuming that CinemaCon would absolutely have something there about Superman, and as a result, we think, okay, well, we had the teaser in bloody December, it's probably the official trailer. Again, we didn't know if we would get it released publicly, but we thought a trailer would be shown to those who attended. And as Rebel of Reality points out here, with the way, and really think about this for a moment, with the way they handled the first teaser in December, it was very planned out, and they made you know about it. Like, they announced it, they had a teaser for the bloody teaser of the teaser, and I'm talking about the Fortress door one, where the camera, like, zooms in. Then we had the teaser of the teaser, showing clips of the Daily Planet, and Superman bursting into the sky, being like, trailer tomorrow. And then we had the official countdown for the teaser trailer itself. So, if you're still with me here, before we get into all the, juicy details of this video, when you think about the official trailer, why wouldn't they do the same? Now, of course, I do agree that although they could have absolutely have shown the trailer at CinemaCon and just released it to us in the public on April 18th, so we would have had to have waited a little bit, as we had also entertained, but maybe they just didn't want the official trailer descriptions coming out, which is why they perhaps opted to show a sizzle reel instead, and then also that Krypto taking Superman to the fortress scene as well. But as for the actual official trailer, yes, it is likely coming April 18th. I could be wrong. Like, it could be a lot sooner. A lot of people are wondering about what could even come out this week or next week. I mean, even knowing the blessing and curse on this channel as I upload this video, people would be like, lol, Boba, you talk about all these details, but now the trailer's out. The thing is, I do think regardless that they would want to repeat the same blatantly obvious messaging leading up to it being like, hey guys, trailer is inbound. Hey, maybe take another teaser of the bloody official trailer the day before this time. Hey, here's another countdown kind of thing. And when you think about it that way, that kind of makes a lot of sense, especially leading up to Superman Day in just a couple of weeks' time. Now, also, just another thing here, CinemaCon, I think there's a bit of a misconception here, the more popular it's got out there amongst fandoms. It's not actually a fan event like Comic-Con, Sure, you can buy a ticket, like a very expensive ticket, if you want to go, but it is more about showcasing studio movies and whatnot to theater owners, to press. But regardless now, that's where my expectations are at. However, they did reveal that this weekend there will be an opportunity to see an extended preview of Superman that's attached to screenings of the Minecraft movie. And I believe that it is the scene of Krypto taking Clark to the Fortress of Solitude and being healed by the sun and his fortress robots. So maybe after that, they could reveal it to the public, but I wouldn't expect that anytime soon, because if that was going to happen, you could just argue, why go see the Minecraft movie to just see that if I could just, wait till they upload it online? Do you know what I mean? There's a bit of ambiguity there. Now, before we get into all the quotes, I know I keep saying that, but there's a few segments to this video. First, we need to get into the descriptions of the footage that was shown, such as the Krypto saving Superman scene, which was reportedly at the beginning of the movie. So, I've compiled together a bunch of sources from Campier to Deadline to The Hollywood Reporter, all saying like different things, well, the same thing, but in different ways. So apparently it starts with Superman crash landing, just like what we saw in the teaser trailer, and David Corenswet's Superman is barely breathing in the snow when Krypto comes to save him. David Corenswet's Superman says, "Krypto, take me home." Now, apparently, this is where things get a little bit lighthearted, but in the best kind of way. So before anyone says, "Oh my God, James Gunn's humor's already in this scene," it's actually not that kind of vibe. Apparently, it is just a bit of levity in like a cool and cute kind of goofy way, despite Superman being really busted up. So Krypto, before helping him, starts trying to play with him, as John Campea says, even jumping on him and pounding his paws on him in an effort to play, which just hurts him, before kind of realizing like, oh shit, like he's being serious. I need to get him some help, and so Krypto drags him to the fortress. And so this is reportedly where a new score plays, or like a new glimpse at the score in the movie. And the camera pans up to the horizon, as John Campea says, and the fortress erupts from the ground. And you just see this giant circular S shape. Well, it's a circular door with that S on it, as we saw in a teaser for the teaser. You're probably seeing it on screen right now. It's that door. And Krypto parks and the door opens for him. And so at this moment, when the door opens, the fortress robots rush to Superman's aid. So more than one, like an all-star Superman. I'm not saying, I hate to say I told you so thing, but everyone was like, that one in the trailer is Kellex. And it's like, how do we know it's Kellex? If anything, it's a fortress robot just like in All-Star Superman, where Superman had multiple fortress robots. I'm not saying that they're not going to do a rendition of Kellex onto one of these fortress robots, but apparently there's multiple fortress robots, and yes, they do look very similar to All-Star Superman. And apparently, the fortress robots were hilarious and voiced by Alan Tudyk, as a lot of us had already suspected. And again, before anyone, because I think there's this inherent worry about humor, and I understand in a way when it comes to James Gunn, because you wouldn't want Peacemaker or necessarily Creature Commando's humor in a Superman movie, would you? But like, humor with the fortress robots makes complete sense to me, because apparently they were funny because their dialogue comes from this like non-emotional, like non-sentient standpoint, right? And they're absolutely not impressed with Krypto. So in this moment, the Fortress robots take Superman to a medical facility in the fortress, and you can see that Superman has multiple injuries to the point of where he appears to have a broken bone. He's even ruptured some tendons, according to Campia, and that must be obvious through like whatever is brought up on the screen or something like that. And so they put him in this chair, and the Fortress robots even begin to hold Superman down. And this will make sense in a moment with the kind of pain that he's about to go through. And then all of a sudden, this door opens, maybe in the roof of it, I don't know, which allows the sun to come in, and then multiple magnifying glasses come down in order to amplify that sunlight onto Superman. So to take a pause there for a moment, that really interests me as to the power scaling in this movie. You may have heard me talk about this before, but the power scaling of Superman is done differently, sometimes in different iterations. Is he completely and utterly invincible outside of magic and kryptonite? Or can he actually get injured if battered enough over and over and over again, even without magic and kryptonite? What way is Gunn gonna play it, kind of thing? Like, how did he get a broken bone, even ruptured tendons? Was he weakened via kryptonite? Or can he only endure getting smacked around enough, even without kryptonite or magic in this iteration, that he'll eventually take on an injury, at some point? If Superman got slammed on the ground, Hulk style, by Doomsday or a kaiju stamped on, I can't imagine he would take that forever, even if kryptonite is a million miles away. So I think it's that kind of vibe, unless, he really was affected by kryptonite in a scene before this. But anyway, before I get too ahead of myself, the shot then goes exterior as the entire Fortress of Solitude begins to rotate in the snow to get a better fix on the sun, which was apparently a really impressive shot, and it heals Clark, although when the sun hits him, he apparently screams in pain. Now, I know the yellow sun is like a good thing for Clark, he kind of soaks it up, but I imagine like the Kryptonian magnifying glasses, like multiple ones stacked on top of each other, is such like a high dose of concentration of it, it probably is like, it probably hurts a little bit, while also healing him. Either way, can't wait for like the drama of that scene at the same time. Now, John Campia also said that they got to see some other Fortress footage right after this, where they cut to another scene and where Superman is kind of back on his feet in the Fortress, and he walks into the Fortress and he's kind of like, Krypto, and he realizes that Krypto has wrecked the place, which is an absolute injection and is reminiscent of how Gunn's dog, Ozu, when he first adopted him, and you may have heard him say this before, completely wrecked his place, started chewing things up, he ate his 8K laptop, so he's injected that menace into Krypto in the movie. Like, Krypto is an adorable dog, but he's also a little bit of a little shit at the same time, if you know what I mean. And as Gunn recently said, it's like, oh god, what would happen if my dog had superpowers? I would be fecked. Like, he put it that bluntly. And then apparently Superman says to the Fortress robots, I told you to keep an eye on him. And they were like, well, we tried to tell him to behave, but then he realized that as a non-sentient robot, we do not care if he lives or dies. So he stopped paying attention to us. So again, when it comes to these Fortress robots, you can kind of vibe the blunt responses and thus dry humor that Alan Tudyk's lines will provide in the movie. And also, while it comes to my mind, I can't remember who said this, but apparently Superman says thank you when he's being brought in with his injuries, and one of the Fortress robots is like, you don't need to thank us because we basically don't care about that. Like, it means nothing to us. Like, we do not perceive, this is me very much so paraphrasing, but they can't grasp the gratitude of a thanks. You don't need to do that, Kal-El. Like, it's that kind of thing. But Superman obviously emulates a bit of a humanity onto... It's kind of like in Star Wars, where Anakin would look at the droids as more than what they are, and Obi-Wan is just like, they're effing droids, mate. I don't know. Either way, I'm looking forward to that. And then Superman at this point is trying to leave, and Krypto is kind of biting his feet and getting him to stay, or trying to get him to stay. And just as he's about to leave, after Krypto caused all of this chaos, you get a moment where Krypto, despite running around in this moment, maybe pretending not to care, he's like kind of trolling Kal-El, he begins to whimper as Superman actually starts leaving. And that's where you'll see a bit of vulnerability to how, despite the little shite that Krypto is, It's like, don't leave dad kind of thing, something like that. And I think apparently that got a lot of ahs from the audience. Like like the dog thing, even though some people were saying at the panel, they were appealing a lot to that, it actually really was working. Like, really was working for the audience. Now, apparently after these scenes unfolded, this is when a montage of extended parts of what was already seen in the previous teaser trailer played, which teased both an awesome and really cool new looks at Metamorpho, Mr. Terrific, Luthor even saying he's back. So clearly thinking he thought he'd put Superman down, maybe like as a result of the scene we just went over. Extra extended stuff of Superman saving citizens, battling the kaiju, more on that later, and flying around with Lois Lane, the Daily Planet, and other things like that. Again, I want to stress, apparently all of this footage, despite the panel seeming like some people were saying it lasted a bit too long and they weren't giving enough details at first, when it got to like stuff like this, despite the panel getting to a point of like, you know, come on, get on with it kind of thing, this was received really, really well. So let me know what you guys think about the scene descriptions. I'm personally quite happy to hear that, again, despite the panel starting off maybe a bit slow, them getting into stuff where the people attending were like, we would kind of want to know other things. And don't get me wrong, we learned a lot of other things. Luckily, they did interviews with various outlets giving us more information than we've ever had before. But I'm happy to hear that the audience really responded well. Like, apparently the crowd in Vegas were quite happy with what they saw, and the buzz was decent. But up next, guys, we need to now get into all of the quotes, which has really got me all kinds of excited with the amount of new context and teasers we get about the movie. So first up, from Time.com, where they do an interview about David Corenswet, but you get like comments from Gunn as well. This first one is about where Superman and Lois's relationship is at, and just Clark's journey as Superman at this present day in the DCU. So Time says, Gunn sheds a little light on the superhero/journalist's state of mind. He is starting to become successful at both jobs in the big glitzy city so far away from home. He's madly in love with a woman who isn't so sure about him, and he's made a few superhuman friends who like him, but think of him as naive. All these new elements in his life have unbalanced him a bit, and as he's tottering, we're going to see where he lands in terms of his values and choices. Now, Entertainment Weekly also got this out of James Gunn in the same area of conversation. So Lois have been dating for a few months, and now they're really learning the ins and outs of each other. What's good about them? What's not so good about them? And what are their ideals like? We have Lois Lane, who's a pragmatist, and Superman is an idealist. And how does that work together? So already that gives us quite a lot more context. Like, this is what I mean. It's not like crazy info, but it gives us that much more to grab onto with where he's at. So like, he's getting good at both jobs, you know, being a journalist, Superman. He's been doing that for a while, but he's madly in love with Lois. They're already in a relationship as of a few months into it. So I've actually speculated about that before, and how maybe they have been dating for a little while, but maybe not too long, to the point of where Lois knows that he's Superman. And like, all of this is now coming into it. So I'm going to really try and not like tangent too much, because we've still got quite a bit to go through. I want to shout out DCU Updates here, because they pointed something out which I thought really opens up the door a bit more here in terms of speculation. So DCU Update says, this falls in line with how Rachel described Lois back in December as, she's somebody because of her profession, but also because of who she is. She questions everything. She questions everyone. She's trying to see around every corner, and that's the way that she faces the world. DCU Updates then says, sounds like Lois has commitment and trust issues. So what I take out of that is that, yes, she might not be so sure about him, not like as in she's not into him, but rather that she knows there's more to Clark that he's not revealing to her, and she doesn't quite know what it is. So like, they're dating, they're at the point of really learning the ins and outs of each other at that dating stage. Clark is even madly in love with her, but Lois is, well, Lois. Now, from Future Boba here, in even more context coming out in new tidbit interviews as I'm editing this video, of which I will cover more in a future video if crazy new details come out, but I wanted to add this bit in. They are also at the point in their relationship where, you start to think about things a bit more seriously and their differences. So Rachel Brosnahan initially said they're learning that they have a common set of values. They both believe in relentless pursuit of truth and justice, but they go about it in totally opposite ways. They have completely different worldviews. He's somebody who's really radically present and always looking to do the next right thing. But that can mean that sometimes he doesn't think about the implications of said next right thing. And she's somebody who prides herself of being 10 steps ahead of everyone at every given moment. She doesn't trust anyone or anything right away, and he thinks that everyone and everything is beautiful. Now, James Gunn said, "I think it comes under basic philosophical difference. He believes that the sanctity of life is of the utmost importance. No matter what, you do not let anyone die ever. She believes, a utilitarian, she believes you want to do the most good for the most people no matter how you do that. And she can see that's not always the case. And those are just two different philosophical, ethical structures, and that causes problems in their actual practical relationship." And then Rachel Brosnahan finally says that they're also just magnetically drawn to each other. That's the other thing. Love is something nobody can explain, and she certainly can't logic her way out of. They bring out love, and their relationship brings out the humanity in both of them. Just to play devil's advocate here, you could argue that she knows he's Superman, but she's still not so sure about him because are their ideals aligned with one another? I don't know if it's that though. It seems to me that would Clark really have told her that, and would she really know that he's Superman if they've only been together and dating, as Gunn puts it, for a few months? Probably not. So I go back to my former point now. But let me know your thoughts. Now, as for the first half of that paragraph, though, with Gunn saying he's becoming successful at both jobs in Metropolis, Superman and the journalist, he's got a few superhuman friends who like him, but think of him as naive. That's really intriguing and goes into just the larger speculation we've been on about in the channel with how Superman's been Superman for some time already. He's not an origin story, but he's still a Superman who's becoming in a world that's had metahumans for a very long time. And there's more of them now than there used to be, as Gunn says, and they're more of an issue today than they used to be. So there's a certain status quo in the DCU, perhaps a reverse Kingdom Come status quo, as I've put out, where superheroes have got used to how the way things are. Maybe you work on behalf of the government, maybe you're sponsored on behalf of Lord Tech or something like that, in the way you see these Lord Tech heroes wearing the Lord Tech uniforms like Mr. Terrific, Hawkgirl, and Guy Gardner. And you see this new kid on the scene, well, not new kid, but you know what I mean, Superman, who's kind of outside of that, and they see him trying to do these things the right way that other heroes know is probably the right way, and they're trying to do it in their own right way, but they view that as naive because they might be like, oh, Guy Gardner would definitely probably try and little bro him at points, if you know what I mean, in the sense of being like, look, I get what you're doing, but that's not really the way it works now. Or we can still do it this way, but man, you're naive for thinking you can do it that way. And Superman's like, look, I don't care, man. I'm going to do it the way I think is right. And that's how, for the longest time, I've been saying Superman, and maybe as per what the original title for this movie was meant to mean, Superman Legacy, he'll establish a legacy upon the current status quo of the DCU's superhero world, and where, hey, heroes, do it the way you want to do it. You don't have to adhere to the government and, Argus and maybe Lex Luthor or, Lord Tech. Do it your own way, man. I don't know. I've always played in that ballpark when thinking about descriptions like this, but I like to also hear that all these new elements in his life have unbalanced him a bit. And he's like, okay, trying to obviously, going from unbalanced to holding firm his values and choices. And I think that's a really good start for a Superman movie. It's similar to the Batman in how Matt Reeves said it's not an origin. It's about a Batman who's still becoming. And by the end of the movie, you could say that he went from unbalanced to standing firm in what he wants to be. And we don't need to do origin superhero movies for these larger, more popular superheroes. Movies like The Batman, chucking us already into A Day in the Life of Robert Pattinson's Batman, and now Superman, I really dig that concept, and that's why I've always dug this concept for this movie. But going back to the Lois stuff, from time here again, something that's really, really interesting about the movie is that there is a 12-minute Lois and Clark interview scene, or rather, Lois with Superman. So Gunn says that the chemistry between Corenswet and Lois Lane actor Rachel Brosnahan was palpable from day one, or more specifically, days 1 and 2. We shot the 12-minute interview scene with Lois and Clark. That was 10% of the movie in 2 days. And to see the energy and magic between him and Rachel was awesome. Not to mention how incredibly prepared they both were. It was a huge relief. Now, Gunn also said to Entertainment Weekly that there's a 10-minute scene of Lois and Clark going over their relationship, the way they look at the world, their ideals, their ethics, and how that makes them who they are. Just another kind of description of the same thing, 10, 12 minutes, roughly. You know, it's the same interview scene. But John Campier said that it was clear that this interview was between Lois and Superman. So again, perhaps her not knowing that he's Clark Kent at this point in the film, or you could argue at this point in the film, she knows that Superman and Clark are the same person, but for, on the mic, she's just saying, I'm here with Superman. And this is when, speaking of, Campier reminds himself of a couple of the lines, and she goes, I'm here with Superman. And she then continues to say, so you've come under fire lately. And I love, the energy even from this description. I haven't even seen it, but they were gassed up when they were talking about this. And Superman goes, not a lot of fire, a little bit. And Lois is like, no, a lot of fire. And then they cut to the part, apparently, where that guy throws the can at Superman's head. So clearly an interview from Lois post whatever Luthor has done in the movie to defame Superman to get to that point of where he's walking away from the crowd and, he gets something thrown at his head. So very intrigued to see that scene, the energy between Superman and Lois versus Clark and Lois. And all of that kind of stuff. And also, that's a long interview scene in the movie. It's a long scene in the movie to gamble with. Hopefully it doesn't get, draggy, because these are all relevant concerns. But on the flip side of that, if their chemistry is so good, which I've always thought it will be between Brosnahan and Corenswet, Lois Lane interviewing Superman, a 10 to 12 minute scene, could be such amazing quintessential Clark and Lois Superman stuff that it could be really good for the film. Gunn then goes on to say about the conflict of the movie. So the central conflict revolves a lot around Lex Luthor's attempts, as in plural attempts, interesting, to defeat and destroy Superman. I think Lex Luthor thinks of Superman in the way that an artist thinks of AI. Here's this guy who's this incredible genius scientist who's worked his whole life to become one of the richest, most powerful men in the world, and he does it all to be lauded. I mean, he wants to be the greatest, and suddenly this jerk comes in wearing a cape with a lantern jaw and a cocky grin, and he just takes all of the oxygen out of the room of Earth, and it creates a burning hatred in this guy. That description right there from Gunn is exactly what I've been saying this. I mean, I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own ass here, and it's kind of obvious Lex Luthor anyway, but whenever I've talked about Luthor in this movie, after learning that they haven't met before, had a conversation in person, I know that Lex's view on this guy is that he's a guy who's worked his arse off to get where he is. And I'm not saying he's the nicest or kindest guy. He's got some pretty nefarious ways with his outlook on how to better humanity, as Nicholas Hoult puts it, but it comes from a twistedly good place, but you know what I mean. But you see this guy come out of nowhere, the Man of Steel, and in the comic books, Lex gets into how you're just the absolute, you limit mankind's potential with you just being perfect out of the box, man. Luthor just hates that. And I don't know, without me, again, going on another tangent here, I just love how Gunn basically said everything that I thought of Nicholas Holt's Lex Luthor and the way he kind of views Superman in this movie. There's going to be multiple attempts of Luthor taking down or trying to defeat and destroy Superman. So it's not one big, build up to one plan that he hopes that works out. Apparently, it revolves a lot around Lex Luthor's attempts to defeat and destroy Superman. So he might have a plan A, B, C, D of how to do it, right? So there's the kaiju, maybe. There's entering the fortress to do whatever he's going to do there. There's the defaming him in public. That's like potentially 3 different things already, let alone whatever that floating bloody ball is in the sky, which is probably some kind of Luthor technology. But David Corenswet says about his own take on Superman, the thing that I was drawn to most with Superman was the tension between his love of humanity and the role that he can play for them, and the loneliness that he feels in the fact that he can never quite be one of them. And that plays out in so many different ways, not least of which is his love of being Clark Kent and getting to play as one of them, at least for short periods of time. I love that description so much. Again, reconciling his human upbringing with his Kryptonian heritage, even just the description of Corenswet saying, like, Kal-El, if you will, has a love of being Clark Kent and getting to be one of them. You know, he's grown up his whole life in the American system, right? Like going to school and stuff, but he knows he's an alien and he feels different. I mean, you would if you could fly and do all these things. So you want to be a part of something, especially since your own bloody home planet's been blowing up. And so he loves getting to play that role, but knowing he can't ever quite truly belong, especially when this movie presents a rejection of Superman at a certain point by the public. All of this is like such potential I see in the movie that I'm really looking forward to see. Now back to Nicholas Hoult here and Lex Luthor. Nicholas Hoult describes what Lex does as tech defense. Lex has invented one of the best forms of battery in the entire world that almost everything runs on. And we don't ever talk about this in the movie, but I think that's where he's made the majority of his money, which is really intriguing just with regards to the technology. Like, most of the world runs on this kind of battery that Luthor Corp has invented. Well, Lex has invented, Luthor Corp distributes. Who knows what technology this battery could, pave mankind to with what Lex can pull off. Like maybe that ship in the trailers run off of this battery, maybe all kinds of like technology in the fictional DC universe, this alternate history Earth, as Gunn describes it, enables. Like, what can this battery do? What can this battery do in this movie that will aid Luthor? Not only does it like fuel various things out there, right, way more efficiently than, let's just say, a fossil fuel or whatever, but it could probably pull off some other things. And I like how, Gunn's like, we don't really acknowledge this in the movie, but it's how he made a lot of his money. And that would make sense. And it probably also fuels weaponry. Again, as Nicholas Hoult teased, what he does is tech defense. So he probably uses this battery technology that probably folds out into multiple different technologies, right, to the military, all kinds of things like that, right? Like maybe his Lex troopers use the guns with this battery. But David Corenswet then talks about how he thinks Lex is a combination of Lois and Superman. He has all of Lois's intelligence and foresight and skepticism that allows him to make these incredible advances and control the narrative and the government and all these things that he has control over. But he has Superman's passion for the world and for being a symbol of something, standing for something, and being a public-facing symbol. And maybe the downfall is that Lex has decided what's right between those two, and which should win out, whereas Superman and Lois are in a constant battle about what is right, so they each get checked by the other. Now, Nicholas Hoult goes on to say here that you describe him in one moment as a sorcerer. The level of science, and I like that in terms of just understanding the level of genius he's working with, and also the science that's at play in this story, and how that evolves, and also the recklessness that he plays with. And I think that also plays into the lengths that he's willing to go to and the risks he's willing to take for his goal. And then ethically, the question that people start to question, I suppose, even though he presents himself with something very different and controls the narrative in that as well. So I love hearing all of this. It's music to my ears, and I do feel like those quotes speak for themselves, if you know what I mean, without me having to dissect the crap out of it. All of this, again, we haven't seen the movie. I still need to see the movie. You know, maybe I'll like some things more than other things. Maybe I won't like all of that stuff. But on paper, all of this sounds very character accurate and character driven. Now, Gunn goes to talk about the vision of everything by saying, I would say it's an original story, but the tone and the look of the film, in many ways, is inspired by Grant Morrison and Frank Quitely's All-Star Superman. But if I wrote my own story, then I could just rip off their look. No, I'm kidding. They're really great guys, and they're incredibly talented artists. And I read that comic book, and it really has this feeling of the big, old school science fiction Silver Age comics. We have robots and monster babies and giant kaiju and all of that stuff. But that is also grounded around these incredibly real relationships with a couple that has started dating a few months ago. And now they're really learning the ins and outs of each other. And then it kind of goes into the rest of the quote that we spoke about earlier. And I would agree, like, clearly, with the DCU's vibe, especially in Metropolis, Superman, the Fortress robots, all of this stuff, very, Krypto, very, very, very All-Star Superman inspired. So if you haven't read that comic book already, or while it won't copy and paste the story, it will just, really adapt the a lot of visuals and tone of that book, and I recommend reading it for all kinds of extra context like that for when you go and see the movie yourself. Now, up next, Gunn kind of talks about, like, it makes me wonder, Clark and Lois, or Lex and Lex, maybe being seen in other projects, but he could mean other characters. So to read this out, I look forward to the time when these characters, one of them does show up pretty soon, two of them, actually. So anyway, when they get to see them in a totally different light, in a totally different genre, and a film that isn't the big spectacle action adventure, maybe something more dramatic, maybe something more comedic, whatever, and see those characters in a slightly different light, portrayed by the same actors. So what he's talking about there is, like, again, what I've been saying this whole time of what excites me about the concept of different projects in the DCU. You're going to have Superman with a flying Krypto to Superdog, but Lanterns is going to be a very HBO True Detective-driven kind of show, but Superman could technically appear in that, and what would that be like? They're in the same canon, the same world, but the tone is different. So these characters will be appearing across different projects in the DCU, even if they have a very different tone and different age rating even. That's what's really cool. And with reference to what I said a second ago, Clark and Lois and Lex in different projects, he says, like, one of them does show up pretty soon, two of them actually. He says, I look forward to the time when these characters. Well, he is mainly talking about Lois, Clark, and Lex at the time, but he could be speaking broadly at the same time, anyone in the movie. So you could argue Mr. Terrific or Guy Gardner. And so when he says one of them does show up pretty soon, two of them actually, well, of course, we have learned that Guy Gardner, Nathan Fillion, is reprising his role as Guy Gardner in the Lantern series. I'm going to be talking more about that in my news roundup coming out tomorrow, probably. But it's something we expected anyway. It's not really news, but this could be a perfect example of a story of what Gunn was talking about here, rather than that of Lois, Clark, and Lex. Not to say that Lois, Clark, and Lex aren't going to appear in other projects, but you get my meaning. It might be more likely Nathan Fillion reprising his role in Lanterns, despite being in a very tonally different project like Superman. Now, with that being said, guys, there are probably other details that I've yet to cover, maybe. I mean, there probably is. But these are like the main ones that came out of CinemaCon that I really, as comprehensive as I can possibly be, wanted to go over in this video. And of course, there is other news that I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video that I look forward to getting into in a news roundup that I will be probably publishing tomorrow or the day after that. It depends on, how much news I want to collect together before people say it. And don't worry, I won't give anything away here, but lots of people are now saying that this Lois and Superman interview confirms that the Reddit plot leaks are true, as the Reddit leaks do mention an interview between Lois and Superman. Now, again, I want to stress, don't worry, I'm not getting into any leaks or anything like that. I just wanted to offer my commentary on this because I know people will be like, Boba, why didn't you talk about, or like your opinion on the leaks situation? So, in all honesty here, there's a bit of a mixed thing going around in where, some scoopers are saying, well, it turns out that the Reddit leaks are mostly false, but this particular detail or two from them is true, such as obviously the 10 to 12 minute interview scene, which obviously is now confirmed by Gunn, as mentioned also in the plot leaks. But also this other thing which is causing a bit of controversy. But in all honesty, guys, this is the thing about leaks. It's hard to determine what else is and isn't true of them. Or, now people being like, well, now every single last detail from those plot leaks is true because this one detail is right, and thus this means any negatively perceived aspect from the leaks makes the movie absolute hot garbage, trash, terrible. And that's the thing that I can't personally stand. I'm not saying that leaks are true or false. For some people to decide that every last one of them is true without knowing that, it's just, you don't know. And without getting into this too deeply here, I mean, I won't be discussing plot spoilers here like that, as, I don't mind learning, like the other day, this person could be playing Jor-el. But to learn potentially every in and out beat of the movie, out of context of the scene in the movie, written on paper, with also apparently the source of the leaker person at the test screening, if you will, being negatively biased, and even like the person saying that they hated the film and they even fell asleep in the movie, even if providing a detail or two like the interview between Lois and Clark being true, it kind of paints a certain picture that I wouldn't want to run with, let alone remotely condemn the movie over after just seeing a list of bullet points of plot details. Do you see what I mean? So I just wouldn't recommend taking it and running with it if you did happen to read them. Or like if you are doing that and saying, oh yeah, this movie's garbage, just like you clearly have a stance that you've already, put your front foot on with the way you're seeing this movie. So I'll just have to see it for myself. And yeah, absolutely judge it for myself, praise it for myself, and also absolutely, and if and as of when it comes to it, critique it for myself with perhaps certain things that I might not be a huge fan of, as I know there's some discussions with that as well, with some of the things that could or may not be true, right? Long story long though, guys, just in case more of these leaked details that are going around turn out to be true one day, please be cautious on social media if you don't want to hear anything that, again, could turn out to be true maybe, as they are floating around out there seemingly after those bloody test screenings that happened in the past couple of weeks. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you got to this part, or this point in the video rather, I'd really appreciate a like on it. Obviously, we're going to be very busy from here on out. The summer of Superman has basically started, so the marketing will really start to kick off, especially as of when we get that trailer and more footage revealed very, very soon. Like, I have no doubt we're not going to go past April 18th, by the way, without this official trailer. Like, let's put it that way. Because I know a lot of people were like, oh my god, we're only a few months out, and they still have the marketing. All I say to that is, I'm not saying you're wrong. Like, look at the Batman with like the DC fandom trailer. God knows how long before the movie came out, and other movies do marketing a lot earlier. My only thoughts on this is such that, don't worry, like, maybe you disagree with it, that's fair enough, but the marketing is going to explode like a volcano when that powder keg, like, it explodes, like, truly. Like, when the trailer drops, the marketing will be coming out like bam, 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 bam. And then I think a lot of people at that point will be like, oh my god, we're maybe getting too much marketing, too many TV spots. Oh, this showed too much of the movie, that kind of thing. Either way, that's everything from me today in this video. Really appreciate you watching. I hope you all have a fantastic, lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.